They call me a disgrace right in front of 200 people. I still hear the echo of those words bouncing off the chandelier that hung over that grand ballroom. The night I realized my silence had made me their easiest target. Margaret, my mother-in-law, stood there like a queen holding court, her eyes sharp with pride. "Some women never learn where they truly belong," she said, her voice slicing through the music. And just like that, every whisper stopped. Every eye turned to me. Ethan, my husband, lowered his head. He didn't say a word. Not one. My heart didn't break that night. It shattered into quiet, invisible pieces that no one noticed except me. I smiled through the tears burning behind my eyes, pretending not to care. But deep down, I knew something had died. Not my love, not my patience, my respect. That was the night they stripped me of my dignity. People say the Lewis family was everything anyone could dream of. Wealth, respect, influence, and that perfect smile they wore in every photo. When I married Ethan, I thought I was stepping into a family of warmth and tradition. Instead, I walked into a house built on pride and appearances. At first, everything sparkled. Margaret, my mother-in-law, would host elegant luncheons with crystal plates and embroidered napkins. She'd introduce me as our sweet Amara, the new addition to the Lewis legacy. Everyone clapped politely. But behind every smile, there was a calculation, a silent judgment of where I came from, what I wore, how I spoke. I tried to blend in. I learned how to fold the napkins exactly the way Margaret liked them, how to greet guests with the same rehearsed charm. Ethan would smile and say, "You're doing great, Amara. Mom just takes time to warm up." But months passed and she never did. Clara, my sister-in-law, was even worse. She was 2 years younger, glowing with her parents' approval. She'd whisper little barbs between compliments. "Oh, you did your makeup yourself? That's brave." Or, "You're lucky Ethan doesn't mind simple girls." She'd laugh it off as a joke, but every word cut deeper than she'd ever know. Family dinners were the hardest. I'd sit beside Ethan, smiling, nodding, pretending I didn't notice how Margaret always praised Clara's achievements while skipping over mine. When I tried to speak, she'd interrupt. "Oh, Amara, could you pass the water?" Like my voice didn't belong at that table. Once I invited my mother, Nora, for Sunday lunch. She came wearing her best dress, hands trembling as she handed Margaret a box of homemade jam. Margaret accepted it with a forced smile. How thoughtful, though we don't usually eat things without labels. I saw the light in my mother's eyes fade, and that moment carved something inside me, something that never quite healed. Still, I kept trying. I brought flowers, helped plan events, supported Ethan's family business dinners. I believed that if I just stayed kind, if I just stayed respectful, they would see me for who I really was, not where I came from. But the more I tried, the smaller I became. The Lewis mansion started to feel less like a home and more like a stage. Every word I spoke was measured, every smile rehearsed. And in every corner of that house, I felt watched, not out of love, but to make sure I stayed in my place. Then one night, during a quiet dinner, I overheard Margaret speaking to Ethan when she thought I'd gone upstairs. "She'll never be one of us," she whispered. And Ethan, he didn't disagree. That was the night I stopped trying to fit in. Because somewhere between the crystal plates and the polite laughter, I realized something terrible. This family wasn't united by love. They were united by control. And I was the only one still pretending not to see it. And it was also the night I decided they would regret ever calling me a disgrace. It began with something small, a whisper I wasn't meant to hear. Clara was in the hallway with her mother, giggling softly. I had just stepped out of the kitchen, wiping my hands after setting the dinner table. Margaret's voice carried that sharp tone she used when she thought no one was listening. "She can polish the silver and wear our name," she said, "but she'll never carry our class." Clara laughed. "Poor Amara, she still thinks she's part of the family." My hands froze. The sound of their laughter felt louder than thunder. I remember standing there, every word burning like fire under my skin. I wanted to walk away, but a strange calm took over. I stepped into the light and said softly, "I didn't realize dinner came with gossip tonight." Margaret didn't even flinch. She simply turned, looked me up and down, and said, "Some truths need to be said before others embarrass themselves further." Then she walked off, leaving the air heavy and thick with humiliation. That night, Ethan tried to comfort me, half distracted by his phone. "Mom just talks too much. Don't take it personally." I looked at him and whispered, "She's not just talking, Ethan. She's destroying me." He sighed, kissed my forehead, and left the room. After that, things changed quickly. Invitations started disappearing from my dresser. Family group photos were taken before I arrived. And every time the family gathered, I was assigned to help the staff instead of sitting at the main table. Margaret had a way of disguising cruelty with politeness. When her friends came over, she'd say things like, "Amara's very humble. She doesn't mind doing the small tasks." The guests would nod approvingly, never realizing I was standing just a few feet away, swallowing my pride with a forced smile. Then came the charity gala, a big annual event hosted by the Lewis Foundation. Margaret put me in charge of organizing the silent auction. I worked for weeks, checking lists, verifying donations, calling sponsors. But on the day of the event, I discovered something chilling. My name had been erased from the program. Instead, it read, "Organized by Clara Lewis." When I showed Ethan, he frowned. "It's just a name, Amara. Don't make it a big deal." I stared at him, the words catching in my throat. "It's not just a name. It's my work, my effort, my respect." He didn't answer. And in that silence, I heard the truth. He'd already chosen his side. But Margaret wasn't done. She needed a public humiliation, something unforgettable. A few weeks later, during a family dinner, she brought up the gala. "Clara handled everything beautifully, didn't she?" Everyone agreed. And then she turned to me, her voice dripping with false concern. "Amara, perhaps next time you can help with something simpler. Maybe setting the table suits you better." Laughter filled the room. Polite, cruel, endless. I felt the heat rising in my chest. My eyes met Margaret's, and for the first time, I didn't look away. "Respect isn't about wealth or class," I said quietly. "It's about how you treat the people beneath your roof." The table fell silent. Clara rolled her eyes, muttering, "Here we go, the lecture." Margaret smirked, but I caught something, a flicker of fear in her gaze. Because she saw it too, I was no longer the quiet daughter-in-law she could humiliate in peace. That night, I found a sealed envelope in Ethan's study. Inside were legal papers, documents changing the family inheritance plan. My name was crossed out. After that night, something inside me shifted. I still smiled, still spoke softly, still played the perfect daughter-in-law, but behind my calm, something darker was growing. Margaret's insults were no longer whispers. They became daily reminders of my place. At breakfast, she'd comment casually, "Not everyone can handle the sophistication of this family. Don't feel bad, dear. It's not your fault you were raised differently." Clara would snicker behind her teacup, pretending to cough to hide her laughter. Ethan rarely noticed. Or maybe he chose not to. He'd scroll through his phone, mumbling, "Just ignore them, Amara. You know how they are." But how could I ignore it when even the staff began mirroring their tone? When the gardener stopped greeting me, when the maid hesitated before serving me tea, waiting to see if Margaret would nod her approval first. Respect had become something I had to earn every single morning, only to lose it by nightfall. Then came Harold's birthday dinner, grand, loud, and dripping with luxury. I wore a simple silver dress, one Ethan had once said made me look graceful. But that night, Margaret made sure I felt small. As I walked in, she looked me up and down. "Oh, silver again? My dear, perhaps something brighter next time. We don't want people thinking you're one of the waitstaff." Everyone laughed. Everyone, except me. I forced a smile, but my throat burned. My eyes met Clara's across the table. She whispered something to her fiancé, and they both chuckled. When the music started, I stepped outside to catch my breath. Lydia, my only friend in that world of pretenders, called me just then. Her voice came through the speaker, warm and steady. "You can't keep letting them do this to you, Amara." I don't want to cause a scene, I whispered. I just want peace.
She paused.
Peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth. Her words lingered long after I hung up. 2 weeks later, Margaret held her annual charity brunch. Journalists, socialites, and sponsors filled the house. She loved these events, loved to play the benevolent matriarch. I handled the arrangements as usual, yet when the local magazine published their feature, the photos told a cruel story. Clara was in every picture beside Margaret, smiling. I was nowhere, not even a mention of my name. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But then Clara posted the article online with a caption, "Proud to represent the Lewis women." It wasn't a mistake. It was erasure. That night, at dinner, I couldn't hide my frustration. Why wasn't I credited for the brunch planning? I asked quietly. Margaret didn't even look up from her plate. Because you're family, dear. We don't expect recognition for helping our own. But Clara's image represents our legacy, she interrupted sharply. You represent support. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. Please, not tonight. Let's just eat. That sentence killed something inside me. Days later, I overheard the staff whispering about changes in the Lewis Foundation accounts. Words like forged receipts and missing donations caught my attention. When I asked Margaret about it, she smiled thinly. Best not to poke your nose where it doesn't belong. The next morning, I found my personal files missing, documents I'd kept from managing event expenses. Someone had gone through my desk. That evening, Clara cornered me in the hallway, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Careful, sister. Mom says curiosity ruins reputations. She winked and walked away. That night, for the first time, I didn't cry. I just sat in the dark, staring at my reflection in the mirror. They'd taken everything, my voice, my respect, my name. But what they didn't know was that in trying to silence me, they'd awakened something far stronger. It happened on a night that was supposed to celebrate family, a glittering anniversary dinner marking 35 years of the Lewis name. Guests arrived in black tie elegance, cameras flashing, laughter echoing through the ballroom. Everything shimmered, crystal chandeliers, gold-rimmed glasses, polished lies. I had planned the entire event. Every table setting, every speech cue, every light arrangement. All mine. Yet, when I walked in that night, I wasn't the proud hostess. I was invisible. Margaret greeted the guests first, dressed in navy satin, a diamond brooch pinned perfectly to her shoulder. Tonight, she announced, we celebrate the strength, unity, and class of the Lewis family. Applause followed, polite, empty, cruel. I stood beside Ethan, smiling faintly, waiting for the moment she'd acknowledge my work. But my name never left her lips. Instead, she gestured toward Clara. And a special thanks to my daughter, Clara, who carried the heart of this celebration. My stomach dropped. My pulse roared in my ears. The crowd turned to clap for her, while Clara gave a modest little wave, pretending humility, basking in glory she hadn't earned. I whispered to Ethan, she's lying. He looked down, avoiding my eyes. Please don't make a scene, Amara. And just like that, I realized I was utterly alone. When dinner began, the humiliation deepened. The seating chart. I was placed 2 tables away from my husband, beside distant acquaintances who barely knew me. Clara and Margaret sat at the center table, under a floral arch labeled, "The Heart of the Lewis Legacy." Every toast felt like a dagger. Each speech celebrated family unity and heritage. The words tasted like poison. Then, halfway through the night, Margaret rose again, champagne glass in hand. The band quieted. All eyes turned to her. I'd like to make a special announcement, she began, smiling sweetly, scanning the crowd like a queen surveying her subjects. Our family has always valued integrity and reputation above all. But sometimes, not everyone in our circle understands that responsibility. My heart stopped. She turned toward me. Amara, dear, you've been part of us for some years now. But truth must be spoken. Our name deserves to be handled with care, not charity. Gasps rippled through the hall. I felt my throat tighten, my palms damp with shock. She nodded toward the screen behind her, and suddenly, photographs appeared. Old pictures of me, helping my mother sell handmade scarves, volunteering at local markets, wearing cheap clothes, smiling under the summer sun. The woman I was before I married into this world. Whispers broke out. Faces I once greeted with politeness now stared with thinly veiled judgment. Margaret continued, "Some of you may not know this, but Amara comes from humble beginnings. My husband and I believe in kindness, of course, but we also believe in standards. I think it's time everyone knew who truly represents this family." Clara stood up, linking her arm with her mother's, basking in the humiliation. I looked at Ethan. He sat frozen, pale, eyes darting between me and his mother. I waited, one word, one defense, 1 ounce of courage. But he said nothing. Nothing. My vision blurred. The laughter, the whispers, the clinking glasses, it all turned into a hollow ringing. I excused myself, walking out as gracefully as I could, though every step felt like breaking glass beneath my feet. Outside, the night air was cold. I leaned against a marble pillar, breathing hard, tears cutting down my cheeks. Somewhere inside, the band resumed playing. Life went on, as if my dignity hadn't just been shattered under chandeliers. For hours, I sat alone in the car, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My makeup was ruined, my pride stripped bare. And yet, beneath the pain, something else began to stir, a strange, steady calm. Margaret had taken everything she could, my respect, my place, my voice. But what she didn't understand was that humiliation can be reborn into power. When I finally returned home, the house was silent. Ethan came in late, avoiding my eyes. He whispered, "You embarrassed everyone by leaving." I laughed, a hollow, broken laugh.
No, Ethan.
"Your family embarrassed me by showing the world who they truly are." He didn't answer. He just walked away. I sat at the window until dawn, staring out as the first light crept across the city. My tears had dried, replaced by something colder, resolve. They thought they had destroyed me, but they'd only given me purpose. That night, I made myself a promise, whispered into the quiet morning air. They wanted to see me broken. Now they'll see what I become when I stop trying to belong. Turning point. From that moment on, I stopped being their victim. I started becoming their reckoning. For days after the anniversary, I moved like a ghost through my own life, present in body, absent in everything that mattered. Pain lived in my ribs like a heavy stone. But grief has a curious way of clearing the fog. It sharpened me. The humiliation that night had been meant to shut me down. Instead, it focused me. I began small. I rewrote a list in my head every morning. Truth, respect, expose. Not for spite, for justice. I stopped waiting for Ethan to speak and started listening to the house. I learned when the staff came and went, which offices were unlocked, and who kept which keys. I took notes on paper and hid them in my jewelry box. Little things that felt safe at first, until they didn't. Lydia became my anchor. She brought coffee, listened without judging, and held a camera like a lifeline. "You don't have to do this alone," she said, folding her hands around her mug. I told her, "I won't be silent anymore." Her eyes went hard with agreement. Then I found threads, small, disturbing threads. Receipts that didn't add up in the foundation ledger, duplicate invoices with different dates, emails where Margaret signed off on charitable matching that never matched any bank transfer. I traced names, called vendors pretending to be a coordinator, and wrote down every hesitation and every lie I heard. Each omitted signature, each forged line on a document, whispered a bigger secret. It felt dangerous, like stepping close to a cliff and testing the wind. I hid copies of files in places Margaret never thought to look. A password-protected folder in the cloud, a sealed envelope mailed to Lydia, a flash drive slipped into a hardcover book at the local library where no one would suspect. I recorded conversations with my phone sitting quietly on the table. I learned enough about tax forms and charity law to make my notes mean something. Knowledge became armor. But my plan had to be personal. This wasn't just about proving fraud. It was about exposing the way they had stripped me of dignity in public, the way they repackaged cruelty as standards. I wanted the truth to land in the places it would hurt the most. The board of the foundation, the magazine that printed their charity photos, the socialites whose praise had become currency for Margaret's cruelty. Risk tightened my throat. If I were discovered, I could be accused of theft, of lying, of trying to ruin a family. I pictured Ethan's face when he found out I'd been the one to dig. I picture my mother's hands shaking and wanted to protect her from the fallout I might unleash. I weighed each move like a chess player, patience over impulse, evidence over rumor. There were nights I almost stopped. Fear pressed on me like a winter blanket. I'd sit at the kitchen table and run my fingers along the edges of paper until my decision hardened again. If they exposed me to ruin, I whispered once to the empty room, then I will expose them to truth. That small sentence felt like a promise, one I could not take back. I also prepared for the moment I would stand up. I practiced a calm voice, selected the facts I would show, and rehearsed the look I would hold when Margaret tried to smile me down in front of guests. This was not a spectacle for revenge. It was a careful unmasking. I wanted their facade to crack under the weight of unarguable proof. Finally, the last piece fell into place, a ledger entry, time-stamped and undeniable, that linked the foundation's funds to a private account used for personal expenses. Lydia uploaded a backup to a secure server. I folded the evidence into a neat, terrible bundle. Standing at the window that night, I felt the old woman of my past watching me, the one who had sold scarves and smiled at strangers. I thought of her hands and how they had taught me to hold my head up. My hands did not tremble now. Tomorrow I would walk into the room where they had humiliated me. Tomorrow the truth would be in my pocket. The following evening shimmered with false perfection. Another Lewis celebration, Margaret's Foundation Appreciation Gala. It was her favorite stage. Polished floors, silver lights, expensive smiles. I walked in wearing a black gown, simple but sharp, the kind of calm that hides thunder. Nobody expected me to come. That made my arrival even sweeter. Margaret's eyes narrowed the moment she saw me. "Oh, Amara, you're here," she said, voice coated with politeness that could cut glass. I smiled. I wouldn't miss a night of family integrity. The crowd chuckled politely, not catching the edge in my tone. Ethan looked uneasy, tugging at his tie. Clara whispered something to him, smirking. I could almost hear her say, "She's embarrassing herself again." As the dinner plates cleared, Margaret stood at the podium. "Tonight, we celebrate the Lewis Foundation and the reputation it carries with pride." The audience applauded. I waited until the room went still again. Then, before she could continue, I rose from my chair. "May I say a few words?" Margaret froze. "Amara, this isn't—" "I promise, Mother," I interrupted gently. "This won't take long." The word mother twisted in my mouth, like smoke. I walked to the microphone, heels clicking across the marble floor. My pulse thudded in my ears. Every eye followed me. I faced the crowd, smiling faintly. When I joined this family, I believed respect was earned by love, by loyalty, by truth. But tonight, I'd like to talk about what really built this legacy. Margaret's voice cut across the room. "Amara, sit down. You're not well." But before she could stop me, I clicked a small remote in my hand. The giant projector behind the podium flickered to life. Gasps filled the room. On the screen appeared scanned ledgers, falsified charity statements, and internal emails, every piece of evidence I had collected. Each document bore the Lewis Foundation seal. Each one was undeniable. The first slide showed a donation of $50,000, rerouted into a personal account. The next showed a photo of Margaret's signature, next to false invoices. Then came Clara's texts bragging about using charity funds for event jewelry. The crowd erupted in whispers. Sponsors stood up, confused, angry. Flash photography began again, this time not for celebration, but for exposure. Margaret stumbled forward, her voice breaking. "This is nonsense. Fabricated." I turned to her, calm and steady. I kept copies of everything. You humiliated me for being poor, for being honest, for being real. But you've been living on stolen respect. Ethan stood pale. Amara, please stop. I looked at him, really looked at him, and said quietly, you stopped me years ago when I begged you to listen. Now, it's your turn to stay silent. He sank back into his chair. Margaret's mask cracked. Her voice wavered. You don't understand what you've done. You'll destroy us. I stepped closer, lowering my tones so only she could hear. You destroyed me first. I'm just returning the truth. Security approached the stage as chaos spread. Reporters shouting, board members arguing, guests walking out. The perfect Lewis empire trembled under the weight of truth. I turned back to the microphone one last time. Some people call this revenge, I said softly, my eyes sweeping across the crowd. But to me it's justice. Justice for every woman who was told to stay quiet for the sake of family honor. Silence fell, the kind that comes after an earthquake, when everyone realizes nothing will ever be the same again. Margaret sank into her chair, her face ghost white. Clara hid behind her fiancé, trembling. Ethan looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. I took off my wedding ring, calm, steady, and placed it on the podium. Your legacy ends where my dignity begins. Then I turned and walked away, the sound of cameras flashing behind me, recording the fall of a dynasty built on lies.